I never thought I'd be the kind of man sitting here, questioning everything I thought I knew about my marriage. But here I am. For the past 13 years, I believed I had a solid marriage. My wife, Laura, was everything I had ever wanted. Smart, confident, beautiful. We built a life together, one that I thought was built on trust, on mutual respect. But lately, something's been off. It started with the business trips. Laura worked as a corporate trainer, which meant she often traveled to different cities for seminars and workshops. That wasn't new. But what was new was the frequency. The trips became more common, sometimes back-to-back, sometimes for longer than necessary. And then there were the expenses. I'm not an overly suspicious man, but numbers are my thing. I've always been good at keeping track of our finances, and Laura knew that. So when I started noticing discrepancies in her hotel bills, charges that didn't match the reports she submitted to her company, I couldn't ignore it. One night, curiosity got the better of me. She had fallen asleep early, exhausted from yet another training trip. Her work bag sat by the door, half-zipped, revealing a folder filled with travel receipts. I hesitated for a moment before reaching for it, feeling a pang of guilt. But the moment I saw the hotel invoice, my stomach dropped. The document she submitted to her company listed the Grand Hilton as her stay. The receipt in my hands? The Lakeside Inn. Different locations. Different cities. My fingers tightened around the paper. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a last-minute change. Maybe her company booked the wrong hotel, and she had to switch. I even considered waking her up to ask about it. But something inside me told me to wait, to watch. And so I did. The next morning, I casually asked her about her trip. How was the Hilton? I said, keeping my tone light. She didn't hesitate. Oh, it was fine. A little noisy, but the staff was nice. Lie. I don't know how I kept my expression neutral, but I did. I smiled, kissed her on the cheek, and told her I was glad she was back. Inside, though, something cracked. I didn't say anything else that day, or the next, but I started paying closer attention. And that's when the other signs started appearing. She guarded her phone more, took calls in another room, would leave early for meetings, but come back glowing, like she had just stepped out of a dream. I wanted to believe I was imagining it. I wanted to trust her, but something was wrong, and I was going to find out exactly what. I spent the next week pretending everything was fine. I kissed Laura before she left for work. I texted her during the day like normal. I even listened to her go on about her upcoming executive seminar in Chicago as if I wasn't already doubting every word she said. But inside, I was burning. That night, after she fell asleep, I made my move. Her phone was locked, no surprise there. But I had seen her enter the code before. I'd never had a reason to memorize it before now. 7284, her birthday. She was either careless or overly confident that I'd never check. I typed in the numbers, and the screen unlocked. My heart pounded as I went straight to her messages. There was nothing suspicious in her texts, just the usual conversations with colleagues and friends. But then I opened her email, and that's when I found it. An email from Anderson and Webb Travel Agency. Dear Ms. Carter, your private booking at the Sterling Suites is confirmed for March 15th to 18th. A luxury suite has been reserved under your name. Complimentary champagne and chocolates will be provided upon arrival as requested. We hope you enjoy your stay. I froze. Her business trip to Chicago was from March 15th to 18th. But why would she book a private stay at a luxury hotel if her company was paying for accommodations? And the champagne and chocolates, that wasn't standard for a corporate seminar. I clicked the email thread and saw her reply. Thank you for the confirmation. Please ensure privacy upon check-in. My partner will be arriving separately. Partner? I nearly dropped the phone. I stared at the word, willing it to change into something innocent. Maybe she meant a work partner. Maybe it was just a formal way of saying a colleague. But I knew better. I checked her calendar next. There was nothing about Chicago. No seminar. No meetings. Just a single event blocked off for that weekend. Out of town. Unreachable. I gritted my teeth. I should have woken her up right then and there. Should have demanded an explanation. But I didn't. Instead, I took screenshots of everything and sent them to myself. Then I deleted the sent messages, put her phone back exactly as I found it, and lay down beside her, staring at the ceiling while my mind screamed. She was lying to me, and she thought I'd never find out. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed beside Laura, listening to her steady breathing, feeling the warmth of her body just inches away from mine. The same woman I had loved for over a decade. The same woman who, just hours ago, had smiled at me and told me she was looking forward to her seminar in Chicago. I turned onto my side, watching the faint rise and fall of her chest in the dim light. My mind kept circling back to that word in her email. Partner. I wanted to believe there was some explanation, that maybe I was overthinking things. But deep down, I already knew the truth. She was having an affair, and I needed proof. The investigation begins. The next morning, I forced myself to act normal. I kissed her on the forehead as she got ready for work, even though my stomach twisted at the thought of her touching another man the same way. Call me when you land in Chicago, I said casually. She smiled. Of course. Love you. The words made me sick. I waited until she was gone before I got to work. First, I checked her closet. She had packed a brand new black dress, the kind she never wore to work. Lace-trimmed lingerie. Perfume she only used for special occasions. This wasn't for a business trip. This was for him. Then I went to our home office and pulled up our shared bank account. She had recently withdrawn $500 in cash, something she never did. I checked our credit card statements next. There it was. A charge from a restaurant in another city. A city she never mentioned going to. I clenched my jaw. She was getting careless. Next, I needed to find out who he was. I went back to her phone while she was at work. I didn't check her messages again. She was too smart for that. But I did check her Uber app. She had recently visited an address in Seattle. We didn't know anyone there. I copied the address and ran it through Google. My hands clenched into fists when I saw the result. It was a condo complex. The kind of place someone else would live. And just like that, everything clicked. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was visiting him. The confrontation. I could have confronted her that night. I could have thrown my evidence in her face and demanded the truth. But that wasn't enough. No, I needed to see it with my own eyes. So I made a plan. Her flight to Chicago was scheduled for Friday morning. That meant she'd leave the house at 6 a.m. I'd wait an hour, then follow the address from her Uber history. If she was lying about her trip, she wouldn't be at the airport. She'd be with him. Friday morning came, and my heart pounded as I watched her roll her suitcase to the door. She kissed me goodbye like nothing was wrong, like she wasn't betraying me. As soon as she left, I grabbed my keys and followed. It was a 2-hour drive to the condo in Seattle. The entire way, I kept telling myself there was still a chance I was wrong. That maybe, just maybe, she'd actually be at the airport when I checked. But when I got there, her car was right in the parking lot. My stomach dropped. I parked down the street, my hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The condo complex was modern, upscale, the kind of place a man like him would live. I didn't even know who he was yet, but I already hated him. I sat there for an hour, waiting, watching. And then I saw her. She stepped out onto the balcony of one of the units, her hair down, wearing his shirt. A man joined her a second later, wrapping his arms around her waist. He whispered something in her ear, and she laughed. The kind of laugh she hadn't given me in years. I saw red. The breaking point. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I got out of my car and walked straight to the entrance. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely breathe. But I didn't care. I had come too far to stop now. I found the unit number easily. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder. I heard footsteps. Then the door opened, and there she was. Laura. Her smile vanished the second she saw me. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Her face went pale. She looked like she'd just seen a ghost. Mark, she whispered. Behind her, I saw him. Tall, well-dressed. Smug. He didn't even look surprised. Just amused. I clenched my fists. Are you going to invite me in? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. She didn't answer. I stepped inside anyway. The place reeked of expensive cologne. Wine glasses sat half empty on the coffee table. The bed, our bed, was messy, unmade. I turned to her, my hands shaking. How long? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. How long? She swallowed hard. 2 years. 2 years. I laughed, a cold, bitter laugh that didn't feel real. I looked at the man standing behind her, completely unfazed. Is this funny to you? I asked. He shrugged. She was never yours, man. That did it. Before I knew what I was doing, I grabbed the nearest glass and smashed it against the wall. Laura flinched. Mark, stop. No, I snapped. You don't get to talk. You don't get to explain. You don't get to lie to me anymore. She stepped forward, reaching for my arm. I yanked away. I gave you everything, I hissed. I trusted you, and you threw it all away. She bit her lip, tears welling in her eyes. I turned to him. You think this is funny? I asked, my voice dangerously low. You think you win? He smirked. Looks that way. I nodded slowly. Then I pulled out my phone. Laura's eyes widened. What are you doing? I didn't answer. Instead, I airdropped every screenshot, every receipt, every email to her boss. Her married boss. The color drained from her face. You wanted to play games? I said. Fine. Let's play. I turned and walked out, leaving them both in stunned silence. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to satisfaction. I don't remember driving home. One moment, I was standing in that apartment, watching Laura's face collapse as I sent her affair straight to her boss's inbox. The next, I was gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached, barely able to see through the red haze clouding my vision. She had cheated, lied, stolen years from me. And now? Now, I was going to take everything from her. The fallout begins. The first crack in her carefully built world came that night. I had barely stepped into the house when my phone buzzed. Laura, decline. A second later, a text popped up. Mark, please. We need to talk. I stared at the screen, my jaw clenched. There was nothing left to say. Another text. I know you're mad, but you didn't have to do that. Please answer. Oh, but I did. I tossed my phone onto the counter and poured myself a drink, feeling the whiskey burn its way down my throat. I had warned her, given her every chance to be honest, and she chose to laugh behind my back instead. Not anymore. I didn't answer her texts. I didn't answer when she called again. I just waited. And at exactly 8:43 p.m., the real storm hit. Her boss called. The first domino falls. I answered on the first ring, keeping my voice calm. Mr. Hoffman, I greeted, as if I hadn't just detonated a bomb in his life. There was silence on the other end. Thick, heavy silence. Then, how long? I smirked. 2 years. A sharp breath. A muffled curse. She said it wasn't serious, he muttered. Right. That's why she booked luxury hotels and took days off work to screw him. Another silence. Then, a single question that made my stomach tighten. Did she know? I hesitated. Know what? Hoffman exhaled sharply. That I was paying for her promotions. My grip on the phone tightened. Bingo. It all made sense now. The suspicious career jumps. The pay raises that never quite made sense. Laura hadn't just been cheating on me. She had been screwing her way to the top, using his money, his influence, his wife's patience. And now, she was about to lose all of it. The fire spreads. By morning, Laura's world was already unraveling. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when she stormed through the front door, hair a mess, eyes swollen from crying. Mark, she gasped, slamming the door shut. What the hell did you do? I took a slow sip of my coffee and set the mug down. What do you think? She paced the kitchen like a trapped animal, her hands shaking. You ruined me, she hissed. Hoffman's wife found out. He's getting a divorce. He's threatening to fire me. I shrugged. Sounds like a personal problem. Her eyes flashed. You. Sit down, I interrupted coldly. She froze. I had never spoken to her like that. For years, I had been kind, patient, the good husband who gave her the benefit of the doubt. But now, I wasn't that man anymore. Slowly, she pulled out a chair and sat. I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the table. You don't get to play the victim, Laura. You made this mess. You lied. You cheated. You spent years sneaking around while I let out a bitter laugh. While I was planning our future. She swallowed hard. I never meant to hurt you. I slammed my fist against the table, making her jump. Don't you dare say that. She flinched. Silence. Then, a whisper. What do you want? I stared at her, my jaw tightening. A divorce. Her breath hitched. No, she said immediately. Mark, we can fix this? I laughed. A hollow, humorless sound. Fix this? How? She reached for my hand. I pulled away. You think you can cry, say you're sorry, and I'll forget everything? I shook my head. Not this time, Laura. This time, you lose. Revenge is a process. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched Laura's perfect life crumble. Her boss kept his word. She was fired. Her partner? Vanished. The friends who once gushed over her success? Nowhere to be found. And me? I moved fast. First, I met with my lawyer. You're in a good position, he told me, flipping through the paperwork. She cheated. She lost her job and he looked up with a grin. She doesn't know you already moved half your assets. Because while Laura had been busy sneaking off with her little boyfriend, I had been protecting myself. I had transferred savings, investments, everything important, into separate accounts. And now, I was taking the house. She begged, cried, swore she'd make it right, but I didn't care. She wanted to be reckless? Fine. She could be reckless and homeless. The final blow. The night before she moved out, I found her sitting in the empty living room, staring at the divorce papers. She looked small, defeated. For a split second, I almost felt bad. Almost. Then I remembered 2 years. I leaned against the doorframe. Sign them. She glanced up, eyes rimmed with red. I loved you, Mark. I tilted my head. No, Laura. You loved what I gave you. Her lip trembled. Will you ever forgive me? I stared at her for a long moment. Then I smiled. The coldest smile I had ever given. No. And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving her in the ruins of the life she had destroyed. Epilogue. 1 year later, I ran into her by accident. She looked different. Thinner. Tired. The confident, sharp-witted woman I had once adored was gone. She forced a smile. Hey, Mark. I nodded. Laura. She hesitated. Are you happy? I took a slow breath, thinking about my new house, my new job, and the peace that had finally settled over my life. Then I met her eyes. Yes. She smiled sadly. I'm glad. I said nothing. She waited, as if hoping I'd say something kind, something to let her believe that I still cared. But I didn't. Instead, I simply turned and walked away, leaving her exactly where she deserved to be. Alone. The moment I walked away from Laura that day, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I was free. No more lies. No more secrets. No more waking up next to someone who had betrayed me and pretending that everything was fine. But freedom came with a strange kind of emptiness. For over a decade, Laura had been part of my identity. I had built my life around her, around us, and now there was no us anymore. Just me. At first, I didn't know what to do with that. Starting over. After the divorce, I threw myself into rebuilding my life. I sold the house, the place where she had laughed, loved, and lied to me. Every corner of it felt tainted, a reminder of what she had done. I moved into a loft downtown. Smaller, but mine. No ghosts of the past lingering in the walls. I changed my routine. New gym, new coffee shop, new habits. I even took a promotion at work, something I had put off for years because I didn't want to spend less time at home. Funny, really. I had been sacrificing time for a marriage that had already been dead. People asked if I was dating again. The answer was no. I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. Trust wasn't something I could give freely anymore. Not after Laura. But I wasn't lonely. For the first time in years, I liked my own company. Laura's fall. I didn't keep tabs on Laura after the divorce, but news of her downfall reached me anyway. Her career was dead. After her affair with her boss came to light, no company would touch her. Hoffman's wife had destroyed her reputation, called her out in online forums, sent emails to her professional network, even had proof of financial misconduct. She didn't just lose her job. She lost everything. Her fancy car? Gone. Her savings? Dried up paying legal fees. She tried to move away, start fresh in another city, but her name followed her. A friend of mine ran into her 6 months after the divorce. She looked rough, he told me, like she hadn't slept in days. Said she was working at some boutique, barely making ends meet. I won't lie, there was a dark satisfaction in knowing she was struggling, not because I wished her suffering, but because she deserved to feel loss. She had taken our life for granted, treated me like a backup plan. Now, she had nothing. Closure comes in unexpected ways. It was a year after our divorce when she reached out again. A text. "Hey, Mark. Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. A week later, she tried again. "I just want to apologize. Please." I ignored it, because the truth was, I didn't need her apology. She had made her choices, and I had finally moved on. But fate had other plans. The final encounter. One rainy evening, I was leaving work when I saw her. Laura. She was standing under an awning across the street, arms wrapped around herself, staring at me like she had been waiting. I should have kept walking, but something in her eyes stopped me. She looked small, tired, beaten down by life. Nothing like the woman I had once loved. She took a shaky breath as I approached. "Hi, Mark." I said nothing. She hesitated. I don't know if you got my messages." "I did." Her throat bobbed. I needed to see you. To say I'm sorry. For everything." I studied her. She was thinner now, her once flawless hair dull and lifeless. There was a hollowness to her that hadn't been there before. Good. That meant she finally understood what she had done. "I shouldn't have thrown it all away," she whispered. "I didn't realize what I had until I lost it." I let out a slow breath. "And what is it you think you lost, Laura?" Her lips trembled. "You. Us. The life we built." I shook my head. "No, Laura. You lost the man who loved you. The man who trusted you, who gave you everything, and you decided it wasn't enough." She flinched. Tears welled in her eyes. "I was stupid. Selfish. I don't expect you to forgive me, but," she swallowed hard, "I miss you, Mark. Every day." I believed her, but it didn't matter. I had spent 2 years waiting for her to love me the way I had loved her. And now? She was too late. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "I used to miss you too. But then I realized something." She looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. I smiled. Cold. Final. "I don't miss you anymore." Her face crumbled. And just like that, I turned and walked away. For good. Epilogue. A new beginning. Life went on. I bought a house, one that was mine alone. I spent weekends fishing, traveling, living without the weight of betrayal on my shoulders. And one day, when I least expected it, I met someone new. Someone kind. Honest. Everything Laura wasn't. For the first time in years, I let myself hope. Because betrayal had taken so much from me. But it hadn't taken who I was. And in the end, that was enough. You'd think that walking away from Laura would have been the end of it. That after everything, her betrayal, her downfall, her pathetic attempt at an apology, I could finally close that chapter and move on. But some people don't know when to stay buried. Laura was one of them. I should have known she wouldn't let me go so easily. And I should have been ready when she came back one last time. The unexpected message. It had been 2 years since the divorce. 2 years since I had watched her life burn to the ground. 2 years since I had last seen her, standing in the rain, whispering about regrets I no longer cared about. And then, out of nowhere, a message. "Mark, I need your help." I stared at my phone, frowning. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe she meant to text someone else. But no, she had sent it to me. I ignored it. The next day, another one. "Please, just meet me once. It's important." I sighed, tossing my phone onto the counter. She didn't deserve another second of my time. But something about the message bothered me. Maybe it was the fact that Laura had never been the type to beg. Or maybe it was curiosity. So against my better judgment, I sent a response. "Meet where?" Her reply came almost instantly. "Hamilton Park. Tomorrow at 7 p.m. Meeting the ghost. I arrived 5 minutes early, standing under a street lamp as the city lights shimmered in the distance. Laura was already there, sitting on a bench. She looked worse than before. Thinner, paler, like life had been chewing her up ever since I walked away. Good. She deserved every second of it. I took a slow breath and approached. This better be good. She flinched at my tone. Then she looked up, and for the first time in years, I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't expected. Fear. Real. Raw. Desperate. My stomach tightened. What's going on? I asked, crossing my arms. She hesitated, fingers twisting together. She swallowed hard. I made a mistake, Mark. I scoffed. Yeah, no kidding. She shook her head quickly. No, not like before. This is worse. Something about the way she said it sent a chill through me. I studied her closely. What did you do? She glanced around, as if making sure no one was watching. Then she leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. I think someone is trying to kill me. The web of lies. I should have laughed. I should have walked away, told her to deal with her own mess the way I had to deal with mine. But I didn't. Because for all her faults, Laura wasn't the type to be paranoid. And the way her hands trembled, the way her voice shook, she was genuinely terrified. So I sat down, and I listened. She told me everything. How after losing her job, she had fallen into debt. How she had borrowed money from people she shouldn't have. How she had tried to pay it back. But the more she gave, the more they demanded. How much do you owe? I asked. She swallowed. 50 grand. I exhaled sharply. Jesus, Laura. I know. Her voice cracked. I thought I could handle it. But now, she took a deep breath. They sent someone after me. I raised an eyebrow. Sent someone? She nodded. 2 nights ago, I was walking home, and this car started following me. I thought it was a coincidence at first, but then it sped up. I ran. Mark. And when I looked back, I saw a man in the driver's seat wearing a ski mask. I studied her carefully. And you're sure this isn't just your guilty conscience playing tricks on you? Her jaw clenched. I know what I saw. She turned, pulling up the sleeve of her sweater. Bruises. Dark ones. A chill ran through me. I wasn't sure what bothered me more, the bruises themselves, or the fact that for the first time in years, I believed her. The decision. I should have walked away. I had every reason to. Laura was not my problem anymore. But there was a time when she had been the woman I loved. A time when I would have done anything to keep her safe. And no matter how much I hated her, some part of me couldn't ignore that. So I made a choice. One I'd probably regret. All right, I said finally. Who are these people? Relief flooded her face. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. I wrote everything down. I took it, flipping through the contents. Names, addresses, bank statements. And at the very bottom, a photo. I froze, because I knew the man in that picture. And he wasn't a loan shark. He was a cop. The trap. That changed everything. If Laura had borrowed money from criminals, I could have walked away. But if the police were involved, that meant something deeper was going on. Something worse. I looked up at her. You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into, do you? Tears welled in her eyes. No. I ran a hand down my face, cursing under my breath. I had 2 options. 1. Walk away and let her deal with the consequences. Or 2. Help her. Every part of me screamed to choose the first option. But something told me that if I did, Laura wouldn't make it through the week. I let out a long breath. All right, I said. Here's what we're going to do. Her eyes widened. You'll help me? I gave her a cold smile. No, Laura. I'm going to clean up your mess. She blinked. Isn't that the same thing? I shook my head. No, because when I was done, she wouldn't owe anyone anything ever again. And the people who thought they could use her, they were about to learn a lesson. The hard way. I should have let Laura burn. After everything she had done, after betraying me, humiliating me, and tossing our life aside for a cheap affair, I should have walked away. But now? Now, this wasn't about her anymore. This was about me. Because when I looked through the file she had given me, when I saw the name of the cop mixed in with those criminals, I knew this wasn't just some bad debt. This was a setup, and if they thought they could drag me into it, they were about to learn exactly who they were dealing with. The name that changed everything. The man in the photo? Detective David Calloway. I knew him. Hell, everyone in this city knew him. A dirty cop who had been under investigation for years, but somehow, the charges never stuck. Rumors floated around about missing evidence, suspects who vanished, people too scared to testify. And now, he was involved with Laura's death, which meant this was a lot bigger than she thought, and a lot more dangerous. The meeting. Who does he work for? I asked Laura, flipping through the documents again. She swallowed. I don't know. I only ever dealt with a guy named Vincent. I looked up. Vincent who? She hesitated. I don't know. I let out a slow breath. You're telling me you borrowed 50 grand from a man without even knowing his full name? She looked away. I didn't think it would get this bad. I shook my head. You're a goddamn idiot. She didn't argue. I glanced at the papers again. There was one address that came up more than once, a warehouse in the industrial district. Fine, I said, standing up. I'll handle it. Laura grabbed my arm. Mark, don't. I pulled away. You don't get to tell me what to do, I said coldly. Not anymore. And with that, I walked out, into the wolves' den. The warehouse was exactly what I expected, quiet, empty, and crawling with eyes. I parked a block away and walked in like I belonged. Two men were playing cards near the entrance. One of them, a thick-necked guy in a leather jacket, looked up as I approached. You lost? He asked, standing up. Looking for Vincent. His expression didn't change. Who's asking? I held up the file Laura gave me. Tell him it's about Laura Carter's death. That got his attention. He eyed me for a long moment, then jerked his head toward the back. Wait here. I didn't. I followed. He scowled but didn't stop me. Smart move. Inside, the air was thick with cigarette smoke. A group of men stood around a table, talking low. And at the center, a man in a gray suit, rolling a glass of whiskey between his fingers. Vincent. He looked up, mildly amused. Well, if it isn't the ex-husband. I dropped the file onto the table. The debt's wiped. He raised an eyebrow. Is that so? I leaned in. Yeah. Then I flipped to the last page of the file, the one with Calloway's name on it. You've got a cop in your pocket, I said quietly. That's leverage. That's power. I tapped the file. But this? I smirked. This is evidence. A flicker of something crossed Vincent's face. If you're gonna blackmail me, he said, swirling his drink, you better be damn sure you have leverage. I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Laura might be a fool, but at least she was a paranoid fool. She had recorded everything. Her meetings, the threats, the demands for money. And now, I had it all. Vincent's jaw tightened. You son of a... I cut him off. The debt's gone. Silence. Then, slowly, he nodded. Fine. But the way he said it made my stomach tighten. Something about this wasn't over. I could feel it. And I was right. Because when I walked out of that warehouse, I noticed something. A car parked across the street. And in the driver's seat, Detective Calloway. Watching, waiting, and smiling. Like he knew something I didn't. I barely made it home before the panic set in. Not fear. Rage. Because Calloway wasn't just some corrupt cop. He was the man pulling the strings. And now, he knew I was in the game. The warning shot. The next morning, I found it. A manila envelope taped to my door. Inside, a single photo. Me, sitting in my car, outside the warehouse. And on the back, a message. Stay out of it, Mark. Walk away while you still can. I stared at it for a long time. Then I set it on fire. The setup. I needed to flip the script. And I knew exactly how. Laura had one last favor to offer me. Her ex-boss, Hoffman. He had dirt on Calloway, financial transactions, missing money, bribes. It wasn't enough to put him away, but it was enough to make his life hell. So I made a call. And by that night, I had my own leverage. The ambush. I set the meeting for midnight. Neutral ground. An abandoned parking lot. Calloway arrived alone. Or so he thought. I stepped forward, tossing the new file onto the hood of his car. He didn't even glance at it. Instead, he smiled. "See, Mark, this is what I like about you." He pulled out his gun, tapping it against his palm. "You're stubborn, but not smart." I didn't move, didn't blink, because I wasn't alone either. From the shadows, sirens wailed. Calloway's smirk faltered. He turned, too late. 2 officers stepped forward. Not his men, mine. Hoffman had made a deal. And now? Calloway was done. They cuffed him before he could react, slamming him against the hood. I stepped closer. Leaning in, I whispered, "You should have stayed out of it." His eyes burned with hatred, and I smiled, because I had just done what no one else could. I had ended him. Laura left town after that. I never heard from her again. And me? I finally lived. No looking over my shoulder. No more ghosts. Just peace. Because in the end, I didn't just survive. I won. And that was the best revenge of all. The end.